one of the best things that I've ever done for my business is make a pivot. And one of the best things I've ever done for my offers, my students, and my messaging is make a pivot. And a lot of the times when we're plateaued, it's because we need to change what we're doing, what we're saying, or who we serve. And this is a huge part of messaging. This is actually one of the biggest invisible elements that we talk about inside of New Generation Mastery is remembering who you are, aligning your message with that message of who you are, and remembering that powerful people create powerful messages. And inside of this episode, that is exactly what we talk about. In fact, I brought on one of our coaches who's currently going through this process right now inside of her business. And we're going to talk about what that process looks like for her, what it looked like for me, and what we notice about our students as they enter the program and might need to go through that process themselves. So if that sounds good to you, well, keep on listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm excited to be here. I believe this is our first guest interview with in my new office, I believe, first or second. So I'm really excited to be able to have that going on today. And today we have an amazing guest who I don't think has been on the podcast yet with her own episode. And so I'm really excited for that. And I feel like these episodes always turn out the best. So today we brought on one of our coaches today inside of our programs. In fact, she is now a mentorship. So she works a lot with we're going to be starting to work with a lot of our mentorship students as well. And that is Miss Jennie Webb. Welcome to the podcast. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate being one of the first or second people in your new office. I love the space. I can't wait till it gets finished. I saw you got some stuff to hang up still. So super pumped.
Yeah, we got our podcast sign. I think I'm going to put up some shelves in here. So if you're watching on YouTube, obviously you can see what we're talking about. If you are not on YouTube and you're just listening to it, well, head over to YouTube. My office looks great.
It looks amazing.
I think it looks good. Well, I'm excited to have you here. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you here is because one of the things that is mandatory with our coaches is that you actually have to do the work. Like you have to be able to implement what is in our program into your own business, regardless of how hard that is, or I don't know, maybe how easy it is, but there's some hard things that sometimes you have to go through inside of the program. And I thought you'd be the perfect guest, mainly because you've been implementing a lot of this over the last year or two, but because in my opinion, you're actually going through one of the hardest parts of the program right now. And so I thought it'd be really interesting to get your perspective on how you've been able to implement the program in your own business. And then what we'll do later in the conversation is talk more about how the students are implementing it, problems you see coming up and all that stuff. So I'm just going to ask a very broad question and you feel free to take it wherever you want to go. But when you first came into our ecosystem and you started implementing the program and our philosophy, the New Generation Mastery philosophy, what was that experience like for you?
Well, the first word that comes to mind for me was terrifying.
Okay, let's expand there. What was so terrifying about it?
Well, because I was coming into it as someone who had a whole lot of beliefs around what I couldn't do, right? I wasn't good at sales. I wasn't good at XYZ. I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know how to do that. I came into it with the wrong mindset, honestly, looking back at it. But right. I knew that it was what I needed, right? So when I started my business, it was out of someone saying, hey, you might be good at that. And I was like, oh, okay. And my husband was getting moved to a different state. I was going to have to quit my corporate job. I was kind of forced into this, oh, what's my next step? And someone just made an offhand comment, hey, you'd be really good at financial coaching, because I'd been doing that in my church. I had been kind of the go-to person. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And that same day, I got an email about a financial coaching program. And I was like, okay, it's a sign. That's what I should be doing. And so I was going down this path of exploring that. I joined a coaching program for financial coaches, but it was missing something. And what I didn't know at the time was it was missing the messaging piece that you teach, right?
Right.
And so once I found you and I was in the ecosystem, I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. When I actually started to try to do it, so many things came up for me. Perfectionism, right? Reared its ugly head. How am I going to, do this? I sat forever with things. Forever. Terrified of showing up. So really, when you asked me that question, it was terrifying because I was doing things I'd never done before. I had started a business. I had moved states. My kids were in a different school system. My husband was, doing something different. We were all in this phase of newness, and I was scared. Really, really scared. So but it was a good scare. I should clarify. It was a very good scare because
it means growth.
Yeah, I was growing. I was stretching, and I didn't know it was what I needed at the time. So
yeah. Well, I love that answer. And one thing I want to highlight is perfectionism, because one of the things that we teach in our philosophy is that, there's a difference between knowledge and knowing. The knowing is in the doing. It's like trying to get a degree on how to ride a bike and then going and riding a bike. It's like, you're going to fall, but the only way to learn it is by actually doing it. And what perfectionism does is it stops the knowing. It stops the learning, the real actual learning of your message and your messaging. So a lot of people will get caught up in, fear of haters, or it needs to be perfect, or people are going to judge me. And it's like, hello, people are going to judge you whether you do it or you don't. Right. You might as well go and effing do it. But I remember that. I remember even in the, when we first brought you on as a coach, and I was just kind of like, all right, guys, you guys got to start doing this stuff. And Jennie, you got to start doing this stuff. But there was a point where you were putting things out there, but then you just went to a whole nother level. Do you remember that point? And what happened in that switch for you? Like, what was the switch?
Well, I think the switch itself came from finally hearing that imaginary ding in my head. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, I get it now. And, you talk a lot about this stuff isn't instantaneous. Right. The messaging piece takes time. It takes the testing. And if you're too busy trying to be perfect, what you're not doing is testing. And that was kind of I was in that place, right? I was like, oh, let me sit on this for a little bit. Let me sit in silence. I often use that as an excuse, right? The silence can be an enemy as well. It can be a benefit and an enemy.
So good. I never thought that way until right now. That's so true.
You can hold on to it. Oh, I'm just sitting in the silence. Okay, but are you really sitting in the silence, or are you just procrastinating and waiting for perfection? Because I was doing that. I mean, I will freely admit it, because I see a lot of our students do that too. Right. And trusting myself was a game changer. I think having you in my corner and you reaching out to me, like you knew, like, I don't know if you had intuition about something, but it was when you reached out to me and you're like, what do you need help with? And I'm like, everything, right? And it started just this floodgate, but I began to put pieces together, and that's when things just started to click. And I was like, okay, I'm going full out. I don't care about anything else. This is what I committed to do. This is what I need to do to be able to show up for myself, to show up as a coach in your program, to show up for the students, because who am I to sit there and tell somebody, oh, you need to go do this, if I'm not being brave enough to go do it myself?
Yeah. Well, especially because that's one of that is a rule, so to speak, of being a coach for us, is you have to be going and doing it. When you said things just clicked, was it, what exactly clicked? Was it that you just finally understood that putting something out there is more of a science experiment than it is like a final message to the audience? Because I think that's what a lot of people get stuck on, is they think that, like, if they post one video, that's going to be a reflection of them forever and it has to be perfect because a million people are going to see it. And then that's the way people are going to see them for life. And it's like, that doesn't happen at all.
Right.
So what was it that clicked for you when you say that phrase?
Well, I think it was just the messaging components came together. They came
Got it.
together in a way that I hadn't seen them before in my mind's eye.
Mm-hmm.
We have the scripts, we have the formulations. I have the knowledge piece of it, right? It felt like in that moment, the knowing finally came to me and
Mm-hmm.
it was okay. And in that moment, even though some of those reels that I did were, comical to say the least, it was then at that moment that I started getting those DMs that
Right.
said, hey, I'm one of your six-figure married six-figure earners. How can you help me? I started to get those things. I started to
Mm,
get people using the language that I had been saying.
right.
And I think it came from me just trusting myself and just letting it go and letting it be. Because I was too busy trying to be somebody that I thought my audience wanted me to be, not showing up authentically. I think for a long time I didn't know how to be authentic. I didn't know who I
Mm.
was.
That's a big problem. Obviously, as you know. So that comment you made was really interesting. Was I was trying to be who I thought my audience wanted me to be, and I think that's what a lot of people get trapped into, and they get trapped into that a few ways. It's number one is like they survey their audience and then they just give their audience everything they want. But it's like, hello, your audience is only a reflection of your messaging up to this point. And if it's not the right people, or you don't like doing that stuff, or it's not resonating with you, then why would you continue that cycle? Number two is I think a lot of people have this idea that there's this niche or this like magical box of people just sitting there. And if you just say the right words, then you attract those people in. But you have to understand the world is filled with billions of people who all have individual likes, interests, beliefs, values. And if you lean into those things and who you are, the people that do have those beliefs and values will be attracted to you. And it's like the most beautiful thing in the world because you get to attract people that are most like you and align with you on the deepest levels possible. And it sounds like you kind of found that switch. Like you kind of found this idea of like, okay, yeah, this really is about me first. And once you understand you and the problems, and it sounds like you're using your struggling avatar, that's
Mhm.
exactly what starts to happen. People DM you and they start to be like, okay, whatever you're saying resonates with me. And to even take it a step further is it hits them on that subconscious level. They just know or have an understanding or just an automated like, wow, I really like this person, or they're really talking about me. And it kind of sounds like that's what you're experiencing, if I'm
Yeah. Yeah,
understanding
no,
correct.
it absolutely was. And to go back to something you said about remembering who you are, that is a
Mm-hmm.
key part of this program because we can, like I said, try to be somebody that we're not. And that is visible. It
Yeah.
is visible to the people who are looking at us, who are reading our content, who are watching us, how we're showing up. They can tell that we're not who we really are. They can sense it. And that's why they scroll or they, swipe past or they don't hit the like button or they don't comment. And for a long time, even though I thought I was showing up as who I was, I actually took on some clients that through working with them showed me I attracted the wrong clients.
Mm,
I
yeah.
was suppressing who I was because they had made a comment that, in the financial coaching space, who's the biggest name you think of, right? Dave
Mm-hmm.
Ramsey, right?
Yeah.
And they'd come to me and said, we tried Dave Ramsey, but he's too religious. We don't
Mm,
want that.
right.
Well, as a Christian, I was like, oh, well, to get these clients, I can't show up as a Christian, right? I
Yeah.
have to put that part of me aside to help these people because they need my help. And so
Right.
through our journey together, I began to say things like, I know you don't believe in this, and that's okay. I'm not going to push this on you. Like, why am I even justifying that? Why am I saying that?
Right.
It's, if I can't show up authentically as who I am, if I can't say, hey, I'm praying for you in your marriage, if I'm not comfortable doing that, I'm not serving myself.
Right.
I'm putting a piece of me in a box. And if I do that often enough, I forget that piece of me.
Right.
And so that, and I know we'll get to that in this interview, but that led really to my pivot that I'm in the process of making.
Yeah. And I want to address what you're talking about right now because I don't want anyone to misconstrue what you're saying. And what I want everyone to understand is that when it comes to effective messaging, it is being you without the influence or worry or concern of the external world. And what happens is you have to attract people like that. But it doesn't mean you have to put every single piece of you out there in your message if you don't want to. For an example, it's like I'm a parent, and do I want to only work with parent entrepreneurs? No, I want to work with any online entrepreneur who's a course creator, a service provider, program creator. So I intentionally will sometimes leave like very strong parenting language and identities out. I obviously incorporate it because it's who I am, but I also intentionally sometimes won't talk about it, especially in launches. In my ads, I'm not going to say, hey, are you a parent entrepreneur? Mm-hmm. But I get to choose that. And I get to choose where and what feels good to me. And so what Jennie's saying is being a Christian is a part of her brand, and that's who she wants to work with. So she found herself hiding that and intentionally decided, you know what, I'm going to put it out there because that's who I am and that's who I want to work with. And this is the language I want to use. So the beautiful part about messaging is you literally get to choose who you want to attract, what you want to say, what you want to incorporate in your brand, and what you don't. And so that's the thing is it's your choice of what goes out there and who you attract, not the external world. And
exactly, right, exactly. And I think a lot of our students get stuck in that. They get stuck in that survey, and my audience is telling me this, and they want to hear that. Well, if that's not what you want to talk about, you're going to find yourself burnt out or bored or not putting out content.
And it goes back to what you said. It's when you're not who you are, you're trying to be someone else, or you're just not doing those things. It's a misalignment, and energetically, the energy that you put out there, which is read subconsciously by people, it's misaligned. Like when someone's lying, you usually can get a feeling of it. When someone's not being authentic or someone doesn't really know what they're talking about, you can get a feeling for that. And that's the energy that they're putting out there. Mm-hmm. So with that, I think it's a perfect segue into the transition you're in right now. I've had to do this, and I know sometimes our students have to do this, but this is what happens inside the program sometimes to get you aligned, is you start to realize, oh my gosh, what I've been doing isn't what I really want to do. So tell us about your pivot, what happened, how it came about, what were the feelings, emotions, like give us the whole story.
Sure. So like I said earlier, I started this business because someone made an offhand comment and I got an email in the same day. And I thought it's a sign. That's what I should be doing. I went and I explored it. I'm like, I know I can do this. I know that this is something that I don't have to go to school for or get a certification for. I can go teach people how to manage their money. I was my struggling avatar. I was the wife who was struggling to communicate with her spouse about money. We were the couple who rotated a consistent $40,000 of debt for like a decade. It was ridiculous. Like, I was like, I can go do this.
Right.
But when I started to put out content, I sounded like every other person preaching, oh, you need a budget. You need to do this. You need to do that. Oh, just do these steps. And so when I found you and I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing wrong. I was following all the gurus. I was following everything, but it wasn't landing. And I knew something intuitively was not working. When I started to make that alignment, I was like, okay, great. But now I'm experiencing this fear of showing up. Where's that coming from? So I began the journey of why am I not showing up? I did a lot of personal growth development. And gym is a great place to grow.
Right.
I hired a coach to help me work through some things. I uncovered a lot of childhood trauma. And so I felt like, okay, I've conquered this piece, but I'm still feeling a lot of resistance. Why is this resistance showing up for me? I tried to, get in the silence, to listen to what I was really, what my body was trying to tell me, I kept going back to, why am I broken? What is
Mm.
wrong with me? And I was like, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. Yes, you might have this limiting belief that you need to squash. Go get that fixed. Great. Check. I did that. Here's
Yeah.
another one. Check. I did that too. I still felt this incredible resistance. And I finally just had to come to this realization. What if financial coaching isn't what I'm supposed to be doing? Because what I
Mm.
found, when I was talking with clients, when I was actually working with them, we weren't talking about budgeting. We weren't talking about money. We were talking about why they couldn't talk to their spouse, what from their childhood was causing them to go out on a shopping spree when they felt sad.
Mm.
What was really going on with them that I was drawn to was that part, that component, not the budgets, not the numbers. Because I'm telling you, anybody with a good calculator or an Excel spreadsheet, they can do a budget. That
Yeah.
part's not hard. The part that's hard is the behavior piece of it. The why am I doing this? What do I have to uncover? Because I had been through that, because I've been on that journey myself, I could help these people get through that. So when I really just considered what brought me joy, what I would get out of bed to go do every day, was to talk to people about those things, not their
Mm.
budgets.
That's an unbelievable discovery, and you have to require a certain level of self-awareness to be able to uncover that. And what I think is so beautiful about this is that you said, you made a comment like, I thought this was a sign. I thought the financial coaching, I got the signs, and I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And actually, I would argue, and maybe you would agree, I'm assuming you probably agree, is that that was what you were supposed to do in that moment in time. That is exactly what you were
Exactly.
supposed to do, so that it could lead you to this discovery, lead to this growth. And you were strong enough and powerful enough, maintain your personal power enough to be able to recognize, like, hey, okay, this was my growth opportunity. I'm taking it, but I'm not aligned with this anymore. And I need to look for something else. And that's incredibly difficult to do.
Mhm.
I had to do it in 2017, and most people know my story of like teaching YouTube and Facebook ads, and just all of a sudden realizing I don't like this anymore, and I'm like resenting the students, and I'm like, okay, something is off here, because this shouldn't be happening. And then I discovered, you know what, this thing that I built a $500,000 business around, I don't want to do it anymore. And that's when we pivoted and we saw huge growth. But it's incredibly hard to do. So what
Yeah.
is it? What has that experience been like for you so far?
Well, when I made the decision, I talked it over with my husband, because I
Mm-hmm.
had mentioned it before. And I just said to him again, as I'm working through this particularly, tough client situation, I'm finding that I'm having all this resistance. And here's what I'm thinking. And my husband he's my biggest champion. He's my biggest supporter.
Mm-hmm.
He trusts whatever it is that I feel like the direction I need to go in. And so he just listened, and he said, okay, great. If it's not this, then you need to release it. You need to just let it go. And so I began that process, but I felt like I needed to talk to people about it. I felt like I needed to
Yeah.
get validation, right?
Yep.
I was like, I'm a verbal processor. So who can I go talk to? And then I thought, I need spend a little bit of time in prayer too, right? My silence, my prayer, my meditation, in getting in that alignment with myself. And I even went to the coaches that are in your group. They're great
Mm-hmm.
friends of mine. They are an amazing sounding board. And I just messaged them, and I'm like, hey, I'm in this position. This is what I'm thinking about doing. I'm feeling this resistance. If you're the prayerful kind of person, would you just keep me in your thoughts? And it wasn't 10 seconds, Brandon. I had like 3 responses from the coaches. And it was like, Jennie, go back and reread what you wrote.
Yeah.
You know the answer. You know what you need to do. You
Right.
just trust yourself and do it.
Right.
And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, that's what I needed to go do.
I'm gonna have
And
to go do all that work.
And so I just began the process of releasing it little by little. I started with my one-to-one clients. I started, letting them know. I started telling my membership, because I built a membership.
Yeah.
I had people that were locked in, for, another, year. I began that
Right.
process of talking to them, and they were all amazing. They were all great. They all knew where I was coming from. I got them with other coaches that could help them continue the process. They were all super supportive, but it was when I was letting go of my last client, I ended up spending 3 hours with them, talking them. I didn't want to let them go,
Yeah.
because I knew what they needed from me was not the financial piece. I knew what they needed was me, but they are
Right.
not my new avatar. They're not my new people. And
Right.
so that was it was hard. It was, I think I kept them on the phone on the Zoom call, because I was like, I don't want to let you go. I want to keep helping you. And so, but at the same time, when I hit that end button after 3 hours, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that was it. New adventure. What's
Yeah.
next?
Well, and you're just realigning to who you are and where you need to go. And you said something before the call, which is like, hey, when I did the financial coaching, I did it based off of like experience, and I just did it off of whatever. Here's what I'm really good at. I'm gonna go do it. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap. And there's a couple problems with that. Like obviously we're talking about like the alignment issue right now. But the second issue is like that's where their messaging actually stems from, is like, here's what I'm really good at. And basically their messaging stems from a solution. And so most people, what they do is they go, here's how I help, here's what I do, and I'm going to create messaging and just broadcast it to the world. When in fact, what we have to do is look at, here's what I'm really good at, and here's what I want to do. What problems do these skills and this desire solve? And that's one thing you said to me before the call, is you're like, yeah, I'm going through the pivot and I'm just narrowing down my problems, which I thought was beautiful, because on this call, you were like, yeah, it's that invisible work I want to do with people. But right where your mind went next was, okay, what problems are they actually really experiencing that this new direction can solve? And so that's a big lesson for all you listeners out there, is that it's not about just figuring out what it is, who you are and what you want to do, but it's also figuring out what problems are those solving. And so what has that process been like for you right now? Just kind of narrowing down those problems. Has it been easier than you thought, harder than you thought? What's it been like?
I have found myself busy with other things.
Mm-hmm.
Avoiding. I have been in that avoiding phase.
Yeah.
And as a parent, I know you're busy, 3 kids, business, a lot going on, and trying to remind myself that you aren't the person that hides anymore. You
Yeah.
aren't the person that has to do that. You have this desire to go help working moms who are really struggling to find rhythm and routine in their lives, so that they can have joy, so that they can have peace, so that they can not feel guilty about taking a bubble bath at night, or
Right.
taking a day off from, whatever it is their responsibilities are, or just asking for help, right?
Yeah.
And that's a little kind of sneak peek at kind of what I'm moving into is, I see so many just moms trying to get that award for doing the most.
Right.
Like, here's my badge of honor. I ran my kids to 15 different places, and I cooked dinner, and I did laundry, okay, and you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And where's your joy? It's all been sucked from you. So
Yeah.
I have really been leaning into more journaling. I came across, TikTok is an amazing tool for creators, but I came across this TikTok of this way of journaling that I'd never seen before. That was just literally doodles.
Yeah.
When you
Like
think of
pictures, like
journaling, you're
drawings.
like you're thinking of like writing out words as you're journaling and your thoughts,
Right.
but as your brain's working faster than your hand can write.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so she's like, yeah, I do this and I do this and I do this. And it just, if I think of something that is important, I write it down, but I'm not writing full sentences. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I tried that one day. 3 pages later, I had a laundry list of keywords, of things that I knew that my new struggling avatar, their pain points, what they would be, the
Right.
problems that they're facing. So I'm gaining more and more clarity as I go.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't gone through, as you mentioned earlier, the process of building this financial coaching business and going through the messaging, figuring out who I am, um, getting those tools, it would be much harder for me right now to do what I'm doing. So I feel
Yeah.
so
And
much more equipped to move into this pivot.
yep.
It's it's reminding myself, okay, you owe it to yourself to sit down and to block out those things that you think are a priority so that you can focus on this, to get back out
Yeah.
there to help the people that you need to help.
Yeah. A couple things. Love that. And it's beautiful to see you go through this experience. And what's really funny is I'm just listening to you talk and you're describing the moms. And I don't know if you know this or not, but you were actually describing very specific problems. You're like, they've gone to 15 appointments, didn't have time for the bubble bath. Didn't like, you were getting very specific on the problems. And I'm just like, wow, she knows the problems. Like she's
Yes.
already listing them out.
Mhm.
And a lot of the times when people don't have clarity, and that's like one of the biggest problems that people have when they come into the program is like, I just don't have clarity on what it is I do or how to communicate it so people understand. And that's exactly the first step is understanding the actual problem you solve. You have to remember you're a business owner and you make money by solving people's problems. But one of the tests that I do is I say you have 30 seconds to tell me the three specific problems you solved. And if you can't do it in 30 seconds, then I already know you're going to have a messaging problem because there's going to be such a lack of clarity in what you're doing for people. And so it's awesome to see you kind of figure out that direction. You're doing the journaling, you're sitting in the silence, but before you take these steps forward in creating offers and things like that, you're getting very clear on the problems. And I had just talked to Rachel about her stuff yesterday, and we were talking about offers and things like that. And I was telling her, I'm like, we can't let the offers influence our messaging. We have to get very clear on the messaging first, and then let the messaging dictate our offers. And I think a lot of people have that backwards, but that's the direction you're heading. And so it's really exciting to see it come full circle.
Yeah.
I want to move the conversation to the students a little bit. What's been when you look at the students and they lack clarity? What has been the number one reason why they lack clarity? Do you think it's because of lack of problems, or a misalignment of business, or a combination of both? From your experience, what do you see?
When I look at some of what students post when they're first getting started, a lot of it, if I had to name it, it would be perfectionism. It would be trying to get it right. You often see those posts. Hey, could you look through this? What did I do wrong? Did I do this right? And our
Right.
response is pretty standard unless we see some red flags.
Right.
Go out and test it. Just put it
Mm-hmm.
out there. Who are we to say what's right or what's wrong? Because we may or may not be your audience. If something was to connect with us, we could comment and say, hey, as a parent, I resonate with that. But that doesn't mean I'm your person, your target market. And so I see a lot of them just wanting validation before they put something out there.
Right.
And I think it's just human nature. We just have to say it a few times. Did you test it? Did you try it out?
Yeah.
And holding them accountable. Like I have a couple of people that I will tag and say, hey, you said you were going to do this. What's the update? And
Yeah.
you've done this to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it lights a fire. It's like, oh gosh, they're checking on me. Somebody's paying attention to me. And it's because we care enough about their journey and about what we're teaching that we want to make sure that they're not hiding and in fear. I mean, some of these students have said to me personally, I have a fear of perfection. I did a Facebook Live on it, right? I think I really should, I'm the queen of that in my former life. And I can really speak to it because I have experienced it. And so I think it's just getting them to understand that there's a level of trust they have to extend to themselves to just do it.
Yeah.
And I know that's a theme, but many come in, and I would just, we'll continue to say the same thing over and over again. Our message is clear among all coaches, among you. We get it. Go test it.
Yeah. It's kind of reframing how validation happens. I think a lot of them think validation happens from the coach or the mentor or things like that. And it doesn't. It comes from you, first of all. There have been plenty of times, like Jim Fortin's been a great mentor for me over the last couple of years, but one of the best things I've ever done is also not listen to his advice. Like he's given me some great advice and has saved me a lot of headaches. But there's also some advice that he's given. I'm like, that doesn't feel right. I'm not going to do that. And it's led to great things because as coaches, as mentors, we can't see everything. Mm-hmm. And validation doesn't come from us. Validation comes from the people you want to serve. And if something sounds great to me and it follows our framework and you put it out there and it doesn't really serve or resonate with your audience, then it does you absolutely no good. And there have been so many times where I thought an ad was going to do amazing and it performed like garbage. And then there's things that I'm like, there's no way that ad's going to convert. And it becomes our number one converting ad. Like you just never know how things are going to land. And so we do have to, and that's part of the program is you're going to have to put things out there. Like if you just have a fear of putting out content and worried about that, well, first of all, don't be in the online business space where you have to put out content for survival. Like it makes no sense. Right. So either you're going to quit your business or you're going to do it. So you might as well go and do it. And the faster you do it, and you just look at it as a science experiment, you go like, okay, I'm going to put something out there and results are going to happen. And it's a science experiment. Even the hateful comments that you get from haters, that's just a response or a reaction to what you did. And you're like, okay, cool. I go back next time and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z and see how that goes. And you don't attach any meaning to those things. It's a very powerful place to operate. I think for me, one of the most powerful things I've realized is that every single person in the world is just as scared as we are. Like we're not the only scared person in the world walking around. Every single human being on this planet is scared of something. It's part of our survival mechanism as human beings. And so that is a part of the program. And honestly, it's just a part of online business. We just hopefully can get you past a hurdle to do it quicker and quickly. What has been the most rewarding thing for you being a coach? Like where have you just like, what are some of the moments where you're just like, oh, that was worth it. I enjoy this.
I think that when I see students overcome those obstacles that are in their way, and they have those moments where they feel like, I just jumped off the cliff and I survived.
Yeah.
And it's from, either coaching that I did or coaching that we did as co-coaching, whether one or two coaches posted, whatever it was, but just to see them make that leap and then come back to share it. Because, and I fully believe this, and a number of our students do it, and it's so incredibly helpful and they don't know it, is when you take the time to share that moment of when you jumped off the cliff as a student, right? When you can say, hey, I did this and I survived, and guess what? You can too. They don't realize how many people are in your program that are sitting there reading every single post in the Facebook group, but not taking action. Yeah. What they post one day might be the catalyst that someone else needs to jump off the cliff.
Yeah.
And to do it. And so that's really rewarding for me, is when they do that and then they post about it and they share it, and there's a vulnerable moment to it that lets us see, okay, we know that they're invested, and we're going to take the time to really just, make sure that we're holding them accountable, we're checking in on them, and that we don't let this one moment, because you can jump off the cliff once.
Right.
Whether you choose to jump off it again. And I think if you string enough of those moments together, I think you can be unstoppable. But it's when you do it once and then you get scared again, that I think can just really paralyze you and put you back into that fearful spot. So I really just, the rewarding thing for me is just seeing those students come up and say, I did it and I survived and
Yeah.
I'm going to go do it again.
Which is so interesting too, because so many people think that messaging is more of like, okay, give me the framework, give me the language pattern, let me just learn how to communicate. And that, which by the way, is a very, very important piece. But what we've spent almost all this podcast talking about are these invisible things that really cause you to not have powerful messaging, and to see people like discover that and to then like break through those barriers, and they gain back a lot of their personal power where the external world isn't influencing them. It's a very powerful place to operate from, and it is very rewarding. And there was actually a conversation in the Facebook group just the other day, I don't know if you saw it or not, but there was a student who really looked up to Rose, who's a student of ours, and Rose is just like really taken off. She teaches Evergreen, but she's like a force to be reckoned with. She's very powerful, not in like the I'm going to control you powerful way, but she's maintaining a ton of personal power and kind of taking a stand for what she believes in, and really facing this problem that she believes is in the space right now. And what she has done is, yes, she's very good at what she does and she's learned how to kind of communicate that. But I would say the majority of her posts aren't even teaching Evergreen. The most of her posts and content that I see online is her standing in her power saying, this is enough of this problem here. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what I'm doing about it. Here's how I'm helping other people. And there isn't really any teaching. And that stems from maintaining and discovering and gaining more of that personal power that you're talking about. So if you're thinking about coming in the program, you're like, I just want the framework. Sure, we're going to give you the frameworks, but be prepared that like this business that you have been doing may not be the business you're going to continue doing after the program. And honestly, there's probably some part of you that already knows that what you're doing isn't really what you should be doing. Well, we're going to help you face that in the program with you're not, because it affects your messaging. Like if you're not aligned and you're not powerful and you don't enjoy what you're doing, it's going to come through in your messaging.
Yeah. I mean, that's what was happening with me. It was, I was trying so hard to put this, square peg in a round hole or whatever the term is. And I kept thinking it was me. Like me. No, I fixed or addressed those things. It's something else. And, I appreciate, the things that you said about, how hard that is. And, you've done that too. And because I've now been through that, I might be able to help recognize when a student needs to make that shift too. And when they feel, I think when they make posts and we can intuitively see that there is something that they need to overcome, I think it really helps that we've been through a lot of those limiting belief exercises and that you teach a lot of that stuff, right? Like it's not just the frameworks. There's so much more that you teach that hits those invisible elements that we're then equipped with as coaches. And we've been through them ourselves to be able to help them see and to ask really good questions. Like, to really peel back enough layers to actually be able to help the students.
And it's out there. Like if you look around at some of the top people, and although I don't agree with his message 100%, Gary Vaynerchuk's a perfect example of someone who has that personal power, even to the point where, someone asked him about if he would cuss in front of his kids. And he goes, yeah, and I do, because that's who I am. And you view that as bad and I don't. We just have different interpretations. Like that's literally like his content. He's talking about it. But everyone's like Simon Sinek's like that. Brene Brown's like that. Mel Robbins is like that, as they've all gotten very clear on what it is they want to do, but more importantly, who they are, what they're aligned with. And then the message, a powerful message can come from that place. I always say powerful people are the ones creating powerful messages. And so that is a huge piece of the program. And it's amazing watching you go through it because it's just giving you more knowing, which again is part of a requirement of being a coach for us. And so now it does allow you to help other students go through it. You can speak from real life experience with that. As we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you, what is like if someone's on the fence with the program and they're kind of like, I don't know, do I really need this when it comes to messaging and all of that stuff? What's one thing that you would like to leave those people with? What's one piece of advice or your feeling of for someone who's on the fence?
I think it comes down to trusting yourself to make the decision. If I think about the sales calls that we do, right? The phone calls, the clarity calls that we do ahead of time for people that aren't sure, the fence sitters. Right. They know what they need, but they've been through so many other courses that have let them down. They aren't sure that they're not going to be let down with this. Right. And what they need to understand is those other courses may not have been what they needed because the messaging is literally the foundation of everything else.
Right.
And so I think just trusting yourself to know, like for me, when you came into my world, it was 1 30-minute podcast. And I was like, whatever he's selling, I need. Whatever it is, I want. I'm terrified, but I want it. I don't know how much it's going to be, but I want it. And the deeper I got pulled in, the more I began, I just knew, but I had to trust that this was going to be worth it for me. And I think if you are sitting on the fence and you're wanting to build a business and you've been trying to build a business, or you just have a thought about a business, this is the place to start and to trust that if you're willing to come in and do the work, and by the work, I don't mean look at the frameworks, skip module 0 or section 1, whatever it is, but really do the internal work, you can't do this wrong. Right. I think there's so many things that can go wrong in other programs, but if you're willing to come in and really peel back yourself to uncover that powerful messaging and trust yourself, there is it's 0 to 60 for you. Look at Rose, just your perfect example. I mean, Rose came in, she implemented a few things, she took off. Not everybody does that. There's people like me who sat for, a year. Yeah. But it was me trusting myself. It wasn't the program. It was me trusting myself. Right. To come in and do this and to know that it's what you need to move forward.
And if you're on the fence, if this is right for you or not. There's usually some other kind of logical, quote unquote, logical fear going on of what if it doesn't work or I lose the money? But you have to understand there is no wrong decision. Even if that does happen, you get in, you don't do the work, that's still a major lesson for you to learn. And it doesn't go away. We have lifetime access. So you're like, okay, I screwed up for the first year. I'm going to come back in and I'm going to get serious now. Then you can start to see that growth. One of the philosophies we have inside the program and that I tell the coaches is look, if they're going to show up, then we're going to show up for them. But if someone's not showing up, we literally can't do anything about that. There's nothing we can do. We can try to call, text message, tag you in the group, email. And if you don't want to show up, I can't force you to show up. There's no way to do it. But if you're going to show up, we're going to show up for you to make sure that you're getting what you need, getting the support you need, getting the answers that you need. And one of the things that I think is so beautiful about the program and our coaching philosophy too, is you kind of hinted at this, Jennie, is they've been in programs in the past and they didn't work. And one of the things that we have inside the program is we will very rarely tell you what to do. There isn't a right, quote unquote, right way to do the program. Even with the content, it's cool, you don't really resonate with thought reversals. Lower the ratio down, be less aggressive with it, be more curiosity driven with it. So you get to alter things inside the program based off of who you are, because we we blend the masculine and the feminine together. The masculine is very much here's what to do, here's the steps, here's the frameworks. And then feminine is very much let's uncover who you are, your limiting beliefs, and remember who you are and align. And we blend and mesh those together. And for me, I think that's how every program needs to be, because one way to do something for everyone doesn't work. It just plain doesn't work because everyone's so different. So we've developed a way to create messaging custom to you, but still follows an effective process. And for me, that's what every program needs. And so, yeah, if you're on the fence, you know what the answer is. It's whether or not you're just going to take that step now or continue on the path you've been on. It's up to you. Your choice.
Yeah, I mean they're in your ecosystem for a reason.
Yeah.
Right? They were drawn to you for a reason. And that's because you crafted your message so specifically to the problems that we have as entrepreneurs that they intuitively knew you have the solution. Like,
right.
And that's exactly how I felt. And that was 2.5 years ago. And your message has evolved. You've gotten more specific, but literally when people are, like, just take my money, Brandon, just take my freaking money and like, let me in. When you have that, like, that's what I wanted. I wanted people just saying, I don't care what she has. I just need, I don't care what she's selling. I just need to be closer to whatever it is that she's got.
Right.
And that's what this does for entrepreneurs. And so if that's what you're looking for, take my money.
Get in. Come on in. The water's fine.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jennie, I appreciate you so much as a coach. I appreciate you even going through the journey. Selfishly, I'm just very grateful for it because I know it's going to make you a better coach and help our students more. But I'm also just excited to see where it takes you. And I appreciate you being here today and sharing your wisdom and story and journey with all of our audience. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Of course. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.